Hello, everyone. I'm going to get started here. It's much fun having the opportunity again to make a presentation here in Vancouver on behalf of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee in order to expose the manipulation of the gold and silver markets by the gold cartel. My first trip here was 19 years ago. It was an arranged meeting with Normandy Mining Chairman Robert Champion de Crespigny on his way back to Australia. After flying all that way from Dallas, this arrogant man refused to see me. GATA went all that distance to help his firm, the gold industry, and the gold market, and he could have cared less about our effort. Little did we know back then that this type of reception would become more the norm than not. What a journey it has been all these years. What we have learned over this period of time is how all-encompassing the market manipulation schemes really are. Initially, we realized that various bullion banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan were collectively suppressing the gold price to keep it below $300 an ounce. Eventually, we realized the manipulation extended to silver, the Fed, the Treasury, Exchange Stabilization Fund, BIS, and other central banks. Over the years, it became apparent the market rigging extended even further to other financial markets, including acknowledged intervention in the bond market, and then in the stock market by the famed, or infamous, I should say, plunge protection team. One of the first people to acknowledge the extent of the manipulation was Chris Powell, my colleague, at GATA's conference in 2008. And he came up with a great line, "There are no markets anymore, just interventions." For nearly 20 years, Chris has documented the evidence of the intervention in the gold-silver markets by the gold cartel. It is all there on the GATA website for anybody who wants to get a grasp on how big a deal this really is. One of the most telling bits of evidence of what the gold cartel is all about emanates from one of the ringleaders of the scam, the Bank for International Settlements, on its own website. Regard what it tells the investment world is one of its products. Interventions. All people here who say they're not intervening in the markets don't have any idea what they're talking about. Incredibly enough, despite the obvious, there are very few in the gold world who will touch the subject. The most important one of all to those with any interest in the precious metals. My role has been to chronicle the day-to-day activities of this cabal on my Le Metropole Cafe website, which many are, at times are so blatant that even a caveman can recognize what the heck is going on. Our colleague, James McShirley, a lumber company CEO with decades of experience in the futures market, has been invaluable in that regard. No other markets in history have traded the way gold and silver have over and over again, sometimes in the most absurd of fashions. The latest of which is the astonishing rise, which is unprecedented on the COMEX, with the gold cartel selling, and the hideous punishment of silver by JP Morgan crowd to keep the price from going above $17.25. Of course, many of you in the audience, already know this, and it's my opinion that this is eventually, when it breaks, become the most infamous financial scandal in U.S. history. As part of that effort, we've had 4 international conferences in South Africa, Alaska, Washington, D.C., and London. At our 2005 Dawson City Conference, senior economic advisor to Russia's President Putin, Andrei Bykov, showed up and said it was the finest conference he ever attended. Gold was comatose at the time. 2 days later, the price began to take off. 2 months later, this picture made the rounds. Nine months after the GATA's conference in Alaska, the gold price had risen 70%. We have been to Washington numerous times to meet the likes of the Speaker of the House, Ron Paul, monetary committees, etc. We've organized letter campaigns to Congress, been on various cable TV shows, presented at conferences such as this one. Yes, it has been some journey. But most gratifying is meeting many of the people that are here, like yourselves, that has made it all worthwhile. Unfortunately, we learned the industry as a whole will never do anything about dealing with the most important factor in the gold-silver world. Yes, to do something would mean dealing with permitting issues and financing by bullion banks, yet any other industry would form an organization to deal with or correct the problem, so they could not be individually blamed. not this one, which has the World Gold Council refusing to do anything about this devastating issue. So bad. John Embry, Chris Powell, and I went to see the leader of the World Gold Council in London in 2010, and we had to sign something that said we were never there. You got to be kidding me. We're there to help them. The World Gold Council CEO today is Randall Oliphant, who actually aided the Gold Tails operation when he directed Barrick's gold massive hedging operations at the turn of the century. GATA's confrontation against Barrick Gold is a presentation all of itself, but just some key points. In lawsuit proceedings, Barrick Gold confessed that it and bullion banker J.P. Morgan were the direct agents of the central banks in the international control of the gold price, that the central banks, having what is called sovereign immunity against suit, simply could not be included in the suit, and that the suit therefore had to be dismissed. It was not, and was settled out of court. It is no fluke that Barrick board members included George Bush, Brian Mulroney, the notorious Adnan Khashoggi, etc., all rich and powerful men. And something to keep in mind for the rest of this presentation. Barrick was directly connected to the bullion central bank rigging operations. Those rigging operations came to an end with Barrick taking something like an $8 billion loss on their ludicrous hedges. The Barrick shareholders paid the price for all this nonsense in the gold cartel operations. Despite being the world's largest gold producer, its share price today is less than when GATA started, and the price was under $300. What goes around comes around. One final note. I made a trip up here in 2006 to meet the head of the Nova Gold CEO at the time, and Barrick was going to try to take it over, and he asked me if we could come up and try to do something about it, and we did what we could. Nothing happened. They ended up getting together, and we never did get any thanks from the CEO for our efforts. So here we are all these years later, and so what? Why carry on when the industry refuses to deal with its most important issue and lets themselves get mugged by a corrupt operation? The answer is quite simple. For Chris and I, it is the life we have chosen, a term appropriately taken from an old mafia movie. Most importantly, major scandals in the past have taken many years to come out in the open. They included Enron, which was voted the #1 company of the year for 5 years in a row by a major U.S. financial magazine. And then you have Bernie Madoff. Who can forget that scandal? Harry Markopolos spent years sending information to the authorities, and they would do nothing about it. The people, the insiders at Enron who tried to expose it, were fired. How hard is it to get the truth out there? Last summer, GATA spent many hours sending some 50 emails to a Wall Street Journal reporter doing a front-page story on the Fed and its gold. We introduced a reporter to a number of those in the GATA camp, and here is the story. But guess what? When the story surfaced, everything was in there except what Chris Powell and I had to tell them in front of GATA. And the reporter came back, oh, they cut it out. She couldn't believe it. But were we surprised? No, it's something we're very used to. But why carry on is best exemplified by what occurred this past year regarding the sex scandals in the U.S. A sexual harassment horror show by rich and powerful men in the U.S. preying upon women was an ongoing fact of life for many decades, but was kept on the down low. Finally, it all began to surface with some 50 women accusing one of my childhood heroes, Bill Cosby, of rape. One or two could be a misunderstanding, but 50? No way. And if you put that together, that's about the amount of evidence that GATA has against the gold cartel rigging the gold and silver prices. While that was more than unsettling, Cosby still has not been convicted of anything. However, it surely set the stage for the Hollywood Harvey Weinstein revelations. The sexual harassment accusations against this famous Hollywood big shot were so outrageous and over the top that it sent out reverberations to the media political world. Senator Al Franken has resigned, and as have media giants Matt Lauer of NBC and Charlie Rose of PBS. Good grief, which is in a couple of months. The speed of those reverberations are maybe unprecedented. The point here of this presentation is that these were hideous provocations just waiting to be exposed, which is why GATA stays on the manipulation of the gold-silver market. The reason so many of the coerced women were silent for so long is because they were going up against the most powerful and richest people in their field, legends in many cases. Who is going to believe against them or who they would be charging? More importantly, in terms of the GATA issue, they might get fired or face retribution for even making such charges. I know exactly what I'm talking about here. My very young sister, good-looking babe that then, was a model in New York City and was invited by Weinstein to our New York suite to be interviewed. He had her dressed up in a teddy outfit and high heels. She was petrified. Got away, ran, called my brother at the time. It was on the record way back when. So this is no horse manure stuff. The point is, going against the rich and powerful is known to be a losing proposition for most, but not all of the time. The tide has now turned when it comes to sexual harassment issues. The scandal took decades to surface. And in my opinion, the same is going to be the case for the biggest financial scandal in U.S. history, that being the wrongful suppression of the gold-silver prices. It'll probably all come to surface when things blow up and your average Joe and Jane is going to say, how could this have happened? Which brings me to a critical point of my presentation for all of you here who are interested in the gold and silver markets. Because of what the gold cartel has done, the gold-silver prices are the most undervalued assets in the world by a hefty margin. GATA realizes we are not wanted in certain circles in the precious metals arena because of what we have to say, that the richest and most powerful people in the world are preventing them from making money going against them. So why bother to go there? Keep GATA out of sight and out of mind as they're thinking. Nothing could be more out of whack in a big picture sense. Think about it. Assets of all kinds have soared over the past years, including stocks, art, real estate. Incredibly low interest rates have enhanced all of them, but not the two markets, which should have gone up the most with all the paper money thrown into the financial market system. The orchestrated suppression of the gold-silver prices was put into play by the gold cartel to deflect from the powers we're doing, inflating the system, and perhaps dangerously so. As a result, the gold-silver prices have been forced to retreat to artificially low levels, which will not stand. They will catch up to and go way beyond what most other assets have done these past years. In my opinion, understanding what the gold cartel has done is the most important reason right now to be in the gold and silver markets. Which brings me to a topic of conversation, surely to be a part of many at this conference, the Bitcoin cryptocurrency phenomenon. 1 year ago, I presented at a Jeff Berwick conference in Acapulco. The conference focused on precious metals and cryptocurrencies. The crypto folks were all excited and all pumped up, and the gold crowd is like, and I was part of that crowd. I'm like, what the heck? I'm not having this kind of fun. And they were all excited because the price of Bitcoin got the same price of gold at $1240. But, we just didn't feel that way because of the suppression. Can you imagine what their conference will be like this year after the price hit $19,000? Good for them. But while what Bitcoin has done has been a short-term negative in the West regarding current interest in the precious metals, it is likely to be a boon of all booms once these under assets begin to take off. A reason is that there are now a number of momentum traders around the world who have made so much money in various markets, they will not be afraid to pour into gold and silver when they really get going. They've seen how the other markets have traded. I think that's what the gold cartel is so afraid of. They will be a force that the gold cartel has never had to deal with before. It is only a matter of time before the physical supply needed by the cabal forces to keep the gold-silver prices at such ridiculously low price levels dries up. The momentum traders will pounce all over this new, delicious opportunity. The gold cartel will be forced to retreat. Now, for what it's worth, this is what I see coming, from here on in, but you never know. Anybody who's been bullish the last couple of years or super bullish has gotten their butt kicked. So, I think our time's coming soon. In my opinion, the gold and silver prices really get going this year and keep on going. The cheapest assets on the planet won't be by the end of 2018. Gold will launch towards new all-time highs in the not-too-distant future. Once the price of silver, the cabal's kryptonite, takes out 21, it goes bonkers. It eventually trades akin to what like a Bitcoin is traded this year. because of the suppression. The efforts by the J.P. Morgan forces to hold the silver price down at levels which are two-thirds less than where it managed to get, for whatever reason, 38 years ago, are the most obvious and onerous I've seen in 40 years, and I've had a great deal of experience in the futures markets. Silver has been so ludicrously depressed that Newton's law of equal and opposite reactions will finally take hold. As bad as it's been, as good as it's going to be, and I think once we take out 21, we head to $100 much sooner than anybody can imagine. Many of the beat-up junior exploration stocks will trade in Bitcoin fashion too and repeat the turns they made at the turn of the century. You might forget, but back then, they were given up for dead, and the returns made in those stocks was just extraordinary. And I think that's what's going to happen again once we get going here and we get some momentum. So I'd like to end up by thanking you all for coming, and for those of you who can make it, God is having a reception at the Lions Pub at 5. The appetizers are on us. It's cash bar, but we'd love to see any of you there that can make it. And again, thank you for coming, and I hope the next time we get together that we'll be celebrating what has changed and not what's going to happen. Thank you very much.